Hi everyone, welcome back to my class. This is Rumana Ali. I hope you all are doing well. In the last session we have discussed about the different topics. Let us recall all that topics before we start a new one. So we have learned that oxygen from the atmosphere, it enters into the lungs. In the lungs some functional units are present that are sac-like, and we call that units as alveoli. So in the alveoli oxygen is present, and in the blood capillaries the oxygen is required. So the blood capillaries, they takes the oxygen from the alveoli and in turn they gives this carbon dioxide to the alveoli of our lungs. In this way exchange of gases takes place between the alveoli and blood capillaries. Once the blood receives the oxygen, this oxygen is required by the cells. Cells needs this oxygen. So the oxygen from the blood capillaries enters into the cell, and that oxygen helps in breakdown of the glucose to form ATP as well as carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide which is formed in our cells, that carbon dioxide is given to the blood capillaries, and oxygen from the blood capillaries is taken up by the cells. This is how again another exchange of gases takes place, that too between blood capillaries and different cells of our body. This is how the exchange of gases takes place in the process of respiration. Before the oxygen from the blood capillaries enters into the cells, certain reactions would occur. So what are that reactions? We have already discussed. For your better understanding, again I am going to give a short recap of that reactions. So this is our blood. Blood contains two major components. One is plasma, another one is different cells that are present in our blood. But here the important one that helps in carrying out certain reactions in the process of respiration is our red blood cell. So in the red blood cell, once the blood gets the oxygen, that oxygen enters into the red blood cells. In the red blood cells you can find one major pigment, and we name this pigment as hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is present in the red blood cells. This hemoglobin, when you look at the structure of hemoglobin, it shows 4 heme groups, and all these heme groups shows a proteinaceous chain, proteinaceous globin chain with each heme group, and to each heme group the oxygen can comes and binds. So once the oxygen enters into the blood, it binds to the hemoglobin of the red blood cells. Now oxygen is bound up by the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin would not let the oxygen to enter into the different cells of our body. If the cell needs oxygen, at that time certain reactions takes place. Just now I told you that oxygen from the blood capillaries enters into the cells, and carbon dioxide from the cells enter into the blood capillaries. So from the cells, the waste gas, that is carbon dioxide, which needs to be removed out of our body, from the cells it enters into the blood plasma first. So out of 100% of carbon dioxide, 7% of carbon dioxide is absorbed, it is dissolved in plasma, and 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide goes and binds to the hemoglobin, whereas 70% of the carbon dioxide reacts with the water which is present in the cytoplasm of the cell. We all know that all the cells, they show some watery liquid, and that is cytoplasm. So carbon dioxide, when it enters into the blood cells, it reacts with the water and it forms acid, that is carbonic acid. This carbonic acid splits, it breaks down, and it gives some H positive ions and some HCO3 negative ions. This is how all the reactions would occur in our blood when the blood reaches our cells or our tissues. So all these things are happening in the blood of our tissues. So once the blood reaches the tissues, all certain reactions are going to happen. The carbon dioxide from the tissues or from the cells, they enter into the blood. They decreases the affinity of the hemoglobin for oxygen. Hemoglobin, it is not going to lose the oxygen molecule easily. Once the carbon dioxide and the H positive ions binds to the hemoglobin, once their partial pressure gets increases, carbon dioxide partial pressure gets increases, and increase in the H plus ions takes place, and when they binds to the hemoglobin, at that time they decreases the affinity of the hemoglobin. Affinity means binding capacity. So they decreases the affinity of the hemoglobin for oxygen. As soon as the carbon dioxide and H positive ions binds to the hemoglobin, one of the oxygen molecule is given, it is released by the hemoglobin, and that oxygen molecule can easily enter into the cells like this. So once the carbon dioxide concentration gets increases, when it binds to the hemoglobin, hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen decreases. As soon as the binding capacity of the hemoglobin for oxygen decreases, one of the molecule of oxygen is released by the hemoglobin, that is used up by the cells to produce ATP. This is what all happens during the exchange of gases. So in this way, oxygen is transported to the cells. Now cells use that oxygen. They form ATP. Along with the ATP, they also form carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide is not needed by our body. It should not accumulate in our body because it leads to many other diseases. So it should be removed out of our body. This carbon dioxide that is formed in our cells, it reaches the blood capillaries. Now from the blood capillaries, it enters into the lungs. It enters into the alveoli of the lungs. From that alveoli, it can be easily removed out of our body. Once the blood enter into the lungs, when it is going to give carbon dioxide to the lungs, these reactions would take place in a reversed manner, like H plus ions, HCO3 negative ions. Both of them combine together, they form an acid. This acid reacts and it gives carbon dioxide and water. This is how the carbon dioxide is formed. Now, the carbon dioxide that binds to the hemoglobin, due to the increases in the, we know that alveoli, it is rich in oxygen. So once the blood reaches the alveoli, partial pressure of oxygen gets increases. Due to the increased partial pressure of oxygen, the affinity of hemoglobin to bind with the carbon dioxide, the affinity of hemoglobin for carbon dioxide decreases. I'll draw the diagram here. This is the plasma again. All these reactions are occurring in our tissues, in the different cells of our bodies. But when the carbon dioxide should get transported from the blood into the lungs, then all these reactions are going to happen. Let us learn that reactions. This H positive ions and HCO3 negative ions are present. They combine with each other. They form an acid. This acid reacts and it gives carbon dioxide, H2O. In this way, carbon dioxide is present, right? Next, the hemoglobin, which binds to the carbon dioxide, it loses all these carbon dioxide due to the increased partial pressure of oxygen. So instead of carbon dioxide, the oxygen comes and binds to the heme group of hemoglobin. So the carbon dioxide which is formed here and the carbon dioxide which is released by the hemoglobin, all these carbon dioxide gas is taken up by the alveoli of our lungs. Once the alveoli takes up the carbon dioxide, this carbon dioxide is removed out of our body. This is what happened. These all reactions takes in a reversed manner in the lungs. So it is happening in our lungs, which results in the formation, which results in the transportation of carbon dioxide from the blood capillaries into the lungs, and from the lungs it can be removed out of our body easily. Now, here one shift is going to happen during these reactions. We said that H positive ions are also going and binding to the heme group of hemoglobin, right? So what about these HCO3 negative ions? They move to the plasma of the blood. So when they enter into the plasma of the blood, instead of these HCO3 negative ions, some chloride ions are present in the plasma. They enter into the cells. They move into the cytoplasm of the cell. So this entering of chloride ions by the removal of HCO3 negative ions is called as chloride shift. This shift helps in maintaining the pH of the cells. H plus H positive ions are going to bind to the hemoglobin. So there should be negative ions present in it, that too in an equal amount, so that the pH gets neutral, right? So the chloride ions moves into the cell and maintains the pH of the cell. So pH of the cell can be maintained by a reaction called chloride shift. So increase in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide decreases the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. This type of effect happens in our tissues, it takes place in the tissues. So this is named as Bohr's effect. And when oxygen gets increases, the partial pressure of oxygen is always increased, is always high in the alveoli. So once the blood reaches the alveoli, partial pressure of oxygen gets increases. Increase in the partial pressure of oxygen decreases the affinity of hemoglobin for carbon dioxide, and this type of effect is called as Haldane effect. It's very simple. Both these effects are opposite to each other. Once the partial pressure of carbon dioxide increases, the affinity of hemoglobin to bind to the oxygen, affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen gets decreases. This effect is called as Bohr's effect. But when the partial pressure of oxygen increases, the affinity of hemoglobin for carbon dioxide gets decreases, and this type of effect is termed as Haldane effect. I hope it's very clear to you. So our topic is pulmonary volumes. Whenever we heard the term pulmonary, it is related to our lungs, right? So we are going to discuss about the pulmonary volumes. How much volume of air we can take in and how much volume of air we can breathe out. We know that breathing includes two steps: exhalation, that is expiration, and inhalation, that is inspiration. Both these steps together can be termed as breathing, right? So the amount of air we take in and the amount of air we breathe out, we take out of our lungs, that particular volume of air is called as tidal volume. Tidal volume is nothing but the volume of air we take in during normal inspiration and the volume of air we gives out during normal expiration. That volume of air is called as tidal volume. One point that you need to remember always is the lungs will never collapse. If it is going to be empty, then after the process of exhalation, it would get collapsed. But it will not happen because the fixed amount of air is always present in the lungs. There is a particular volume of air that is always present in our lungs. So, besides this particular volume that is always there in the lungs, the volume of air we breathe in and the volume of air we breathe out, this particular volume is termed as tidal volume, right? Now, once we breathe out or once we take the oxygen in, if additional amount of oxygen we are going to take, then that volume of air is named by the different one. That means after normal inspiration, we are not exhaling the air out, but after a particular amount, after we take in the 500 ml of air into the lungs, after we breathe 500 ml, that is a tidal volume, 500 ml of air we breathe in and 500 ml of air we breathe out, that is our tidal volume given. So, if the tidal volume exceeds, that means after a normal inspiration, if we are going to take additional amount of oxygen into the lungs, then the lungs expands more and the volume of air that we are taking, additional volume we can say, additional volume of inspired air after normal inspiration, that volume of air is named as IRV. Here IRV stands for Inspirational Reserve Volume, right? So tidal volume is a normal inspiration volume. So additional volume of inspired air is termed as Inspirational Reserve Volume, and it is given as the volume of air, the additional volume of air that we inspire, it is given as 2500 to 3000 ml. When we inspire forcefully, after a normal inspiration, when we inspire forcefully, more amount of air if we are going to take in rather than after the normal inspiration, then that type of air is called as Inspirational then that type of air shows the volume, and the volume of air is called as inspirational reserve volume. It is given as 2500 to 3000 ml. This is about normal inspiration and expiration, and we have discussed about inspirational reserve volume. I told you that a fixed amount of air is always present in the lungs. From that fixed amount also we can expire some of its amount. That means after normal expiration, after we exhale carbon dioxide, after we exhale tidal volume of air, after a normal expiration, if we are going to expire more amount of air that is found in our lungs, then for example this one is a fixed amount of air that is present in our lung. Out of this much amount, if we are removing forceful expiration after a normal expiration, that type of air which is removed from our lungs, it is regarded as a volume expiratory reserve volume, which is given as ER. Volume of air that never be removed from our lungs, that cannot be removed from our lungs, is regarded as RV, that is residual volume. Residual volume is a volume, it's an amount of air that never be removed from our lungs. This is how the different volumes, different pulmonary volumes are given, and their ranges are also given. So expiratory reserve volume will be like 1100, it will be like 1000 to 1100 ml, and residual volume which is always present in our lungs, it is 1100 to 1200 ml. These are the different volumes that are shown by our lungs. So here tidal volume means normal inspiration, normal expiration. The volume of air which we normally inspire, the volume of air which we normally expire, that is given as 500 ml, and it is named as tidal volume. Besides this tidal volume, if we are going to expire additionally, then it is given as expiratory reserve volume. If we are inspiring the amount of air, the volume of air additionally, then that type of inspirational volume is given as inspirational reserve volume. So, and the rest of the air which is always present in our lungs, that is given as residual volume. So this is about the different pulmonary volumes. Let us talk about the capacities now. So whenever we talk about the capacities, first we need to define what is the meaning of capacity, right? So capacity means combination of different volumes. If we are combining different volume of air that can be taken or given out by our lungs, that combination of volumes is regarded as capacity. There are three different capacities given. We have seen that four different volumes are given, four different pulmonary volumes are given here: tidal volume, inspirational reserve volume, inspiratory reserve volume IRV, expiratory reserve volume ERV, and residual volume. These are four pulmonary volumes. Likewise, there are certain combinations, and we call that combination of volumes as capacities. So there are three different capacities, pulmonary capacities that are given, and they are, this is our lung. Here tidal volume, normal expiration and inspiration, tidal volume TV. Additional inspiration, additional amount of inspired air if it is going to be taken, then it is IRV. Additional amount of air exhaled after a normal expiration, then it is given as ERV. And the fixed amount of volume of air that is always present in our lungs, that cannot be removed, it is given as RV, residual volume. These are the different volumes given. Now let us see what are the different capacities that we can see. So different capacities are, if we combine tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume, then it is called as EC, expiratory capacities. If we combine tidal volume with that of inspiratory reserve volumes, then it is termed as inspiratory capacities. And if the expiratory reserve volume and residual volumes are combined with each other, then it shows the capacity of a lung, that is named as functional residual capacity. Here I am going to write the full form. IC means inspiratory capacity. It shows the combination of two volumes and they are TV plus IRV. The value of TV is already given here, that is 500. So we'll write here 500 plus IRV is also given, inspiratory reserve volume, that is 2500 to 3000 ml. So we'll write here 2500 to 3000 ml. If we add up this, then it will be like 3000 to 3500 ml of air can be taken up, and it is regarded as inspiratory capacity. So the inspiratory capacity of a lung is given as 3000 to 3500 ml. Now we'll calculate EC. Here we'll calculate. EC stands for expiratory capacity, and this capacity shows the combination of TV and ERV. TV stands for tidal volume, ERV expiratory reserve volume. TV is given as 500 plus ERV expiratory reserve volume is given as 1000 to 1100 ml. If we add up these volume of air, then it gives the expiratory capacity of a lung. So it will be 1500 to 16 ml. Now the last capacity is functional residual capacity, shows the combination of ERV and RV, expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. Expiratory reserve volume is given as 1000 to 1100 plus RV is given as 1100 to 1200. So if we add up this, then it will be 1000 plus 1100, 2100 to 1100 plus 1200, 2300 ml. This is the functional residual capacity, FRC, of a lung. I hope it's clear. Volumes are given for different volumes that we have already discussed. Their values are also given, which we need to remember. Amount of air that we inhale, amount of air that we exhale, and amount of air that is taken in forcefully, and amount of air that is taken out, that gives out forcefully. All these different volumes are given by the different names and by the different values. By combining these volumes, we can calculate the capacity of a lung: inspiratory capacity, expiratory capacity, and functional residual capacity. When we combine all these capacities together, then it is given, or it is termed as total lung capacity, TLC. If we combine all these volumes like IRV, TV, ERV and RV, then it is termed as total lung capacity. So when we combine all these capacities like IRV, TV, ERV and RV, then we can calculate total lung capacity. Total capacity of the lung we can calculate by combining all these volumes. One more capacity is given here. So and that capacity is named as vital capacity. Here what happens? What type of volumes we are adding here? We are combining here. Let us see. So once we inspire air, we take in the oxygen and we remove carbon dioxide. We gives out the air. After a normal inspiration and expiration, we are going to remove more amount of air forcefully. That is expiratory reserve volume, the forceful expiration. And as soon as the forceful expiration takes place, we are taking the air in, and we are taking the air in forcefully. That means after a normal inspiration and expiration, a forceful expiration is happening, and then a forceful inspiration is going to happen. This type of capacity is called as vital capacity. In short, we can write as vital capacity shows the combination of tidal volume, normal expiration and inspiration, then inspiratory reserve volume, forceful inspiration, then in expiratory reserve volume, forceful expiration. When we combine these three volumes, then it can give us the vital capacity of our lung. These are the different volumes and the different capacities of the lung during the process of respiration. So that's all for today. Meet you in next class. Thank you.